Good evening, and you're very welcome to another episode of the Final Whistle Women's League of Ireland podcast here on finewhistle.ie with myself, Breifne, Earley, and of course, as always, for possibly the second last time this season, Aaron Clarke. Aaron, how are you?
I'm not so bad. How are you? It feels weird when you look at saying the league is over. It feels weird when you think only a couple of months ago it was starting. It's a mad one. It's just flown by this year. It's been hectic, I think, and I think it's probably been one of the most enjoyable ones, I'd say, in terms of football and stories and stuff like that. Like, I don't know about yourself, but I'm a little bit sad it's coming to an end, as much as I'm looking forward to a bit of a break when the international finish.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a strange enough season, I suppose. We've been here from, obviously, this is our fourth year doing this. I think we've been doing this together for about 2.5 years of that. There's a few other iterations before us, but it's definitely been one of the ones where I felt that any team could do anything on any given day, and that we haven't always been able to say that through the history of the league. And I think we even saw, like, in the last few weeks, okay, you could argue that some of the teams maybe had very little to play for in the closing stages, but Sligo Rovers, who were so far adrift for most of the season, picked up, I think, 6 or 7 points in the last
six out of the last
four games, which is unbeaten. Absolutely nuts. And great. And delighted to see that our early season predictions of how teams could compete with each other came kind of to fruition in the end. I suppose just the way the fixture list ran out, if they'd come a little bit earlier, it might have taken a little bit less pressure off people down there. But yeah, it's been interesting. Three teams that we know of parted ways with their manager, I suppose, at the end of the season. Sean Russell's going to come in and take the place of Dominic Foley at Treaty United. Good appointment, well known to the league. Obviously a player, his dad Martin, probably one of the best players ever to play in the Men's League of Ireland, and a coach with so many clubs at Athlone, Limerick. There's definitely more. He was at UCD for a while. I think he might have been at Pats for a while as well as an assistant coach. So he knows the league so well. Sean himself, another man without that has a fairly good story in terms of he took the league on a couple of years ago. So it's great to see him still involved and still there. He was very hard done by when he got injured a couple of years back, if memory serves, and had to kind of go public and do a GoFundMe to pay a hospital bill because the club at the time in Limerick, although it has to be said not Treaty United, refused to pay or weren't properly insured, or there was some complication. I don't know the exact details, but there was a public appeal for that. So great to see him still involved in the club. I know he's been involved underage in recent years, but nice to see a new face in the dugout. But also Wexford and Sligo Rovers looking for new managers. We might see Conor O'Grady might have put himself in the frame for that job with a great run into the second half of the last few games of the season. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the interesting thing, and we're talking about the vacancies that are there already. We're still not sure. There's a couple we could potentially see more.
Like it could be. Who do you think? Who are you hearing on the grapevine?
It's not even who I'm hearing. Like, there's a couple you can see in terms of seasons that managers have been there for quite a while, and I don't expect change in Cork. I think the big one this off season is actually in Athlone, and I was asked this question on social media the other day when I put up about the departures of the managers. Is about Kieran Kilduff, because there's no doubt there's going to be interest from the men's game to try and lure him into the League of Ireland. The only thing I'd say on this, and I've gotten to speak to Kieran quite a bit. I spoke to him the other day as well, and you can see when he commits to a club, he's all in. He's all in. He's fully invested. He's as all in as he was when he was a player. And I think while people have concerns over the likes of Kieran, whether he could be potentially looking at that opportunity if it was to come, I think it'd have to be the right opportunity for him to even consider it. I think that idea of Champions League football, I think, is a massive enticement. I think he's somebody who's really bought into the Women's League, and I know there is going to be a lot of speculation about him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he turns down some decent jobs this off season because of what he's done at Athlone. The other side of it then is you've managers who've been there for quite a while. We spoke about James O'Callaghan a lot. It's a big rebuilding job at Peamount this off season. What are the infrastructures off the field in terms of to help and support with that? That's the one where I'd be keeping an interest in. I think in order for Peamount to really stay together, they need to keep James, they need to keep Karen, and they need to keep Soifto. They're the three cogs that will help to keep that club going. If they were to lose one, if not two of them, I think it'd be a big, massive comeback for them. When you look at this season, Dominic Foley sad to see him go, considering the start of the season. I don't think either of us would have said that Treaty would have finished within 3 points of Peamount United's.
No,
They'd have more. They'd have
no.
more wins than Shamrock Rovers. I think it's the same amount of wins as Peamount. And like when you look at that, it's just absolutely bonkers, to the sense that they've done so well. And like I think Hugh Strong probably surprised me a little bit. And I got a message on social media the other day off somebody that was saying that like he told the players at the weekend that he was leaving. Like the other side of women's football now is it's a massive commitment. It's a massive, massive commitment to want to be involved. And we haven't even spoke about the other carrot that's dangling there, in the sense that Waterford are currently on the hunt as well for a manager. So like you look at that right now, there was quite a lot of vacancies up until there's currently three vacancies at the minute. One was filled last week with today with Sean Russell. Like I think this league is at a stage where I think managers are going to start to come under pressure a lot more sooner. I actually spoke to Colin O'Neill a little bit about the Shamrock Rovers situation at the weekend, and I sort of said to him, you know, when you look back at the start of the season, how poor of a season it was, and like he sort of gave me the inklings that he's going to be there again next year. He's ready to go next year, and he wants to build off that sort of squad that he has in terms of the youth. Because he was talking to me about, you know, having to do a lot of that with UCD on a year in, year out, and the importance of maybe not going to try and the big money signing in and trying and build through the club. So I wouldn't expect a change at Shamrock Rovers. I'd be very surprised if we see a change at Shelbourne this year. I think the vibe I'm getting is that the players like him. Yes, they know that the poor start of the season with a couple of draws didn't really help them. But, you know, it's other than that, it's the only other real one you're probably thinking is Cork need to sort out what's going on off the field with the stuff we see in the other week, just to sort of calm that down. But I'd still expect to see Danny in the dugout next year.
Well, he signed a contract, so he's there next year as far as he and the club are concerned. And I think that's all that really matters in that discussion. So I do note the few bits and pieces that were made public by ex-players, but unfortunately, that probably doesn't have much effect, if that makes sense, in terms of...
I don't think it does. I don't think it does. I think definitely for a Cork City viewpoint, they'll want to clear that up in the off-season and just sort of squash that, and, you know, and sort of put to bed any grievances, just to give the players who've left that bit of comfort as well, and as well to clear the air, because I think that's important because they had a good season. They've built on quite a bit of things. Yes, they sort of fell off at the end of it, but then again, you can look at multiple clubs who sort of fell off the wagon as there was nothing to play for late on in the season.
Talk me through the teams in the league, and let's look at the winners and losers. I know obviously the league table tells a story, but in terms of where they were, what expectations were at the start of the year, like I think Peamount will be disappointed, and Shamrock Rovers probably disappointed in the first half of the season, and second half of the season acceptable, get a kind of passing grade for the second half of the season. There's a couple of appearances in there as well.
Collie said to give him a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's fair.
Collie.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
The biggest problem with Shamrock Rovers is, and when I posted the Collie O'Neill interview the other day, the one comment I got back was the game changers comment. And for me, the big thing is I think Shamrock Rovers realise they went about this project wrong. Yeah. Just throwing things at it and resources at it and just being like, okay, we're going to get the best of players. It doesn't always work. Bows tried it when they had expenses and stuff like that. They couldn't get the players through the door, no matter what they were offering. So I think Shamrock Rovers realised that, and when they sort of understood where they're at, they were able to develop. And I think when you look at Rovers, the likes of young Ella Kelly started again on Saturday, Katie O'Reilly coming off the bench, young Alana Prizeman, they've had a lot of good players. The only thing when I look at this Rovers team, and I actually think back, and I'm sort of questioning Collie a little bit, is Jane Merrin and Abby Tull leaving Rovers last winter to go to Wexford, because they've been two of Wexford's standout players this year, and they'd have made a massive difference for Shamrock Rovers. But like, if I look at Rovers as a whole, horrific start to the season, finished very well. Like, if this had been their first season, we'd be saying, yeah, it's been brilliant, it's been very good, cup final, as you say. It's good, and you wouldn't have complained about it. I think because of what they done last year, that's why people had a lot higher expectations on them this year. I think Peamount, the problem with Peamount in this one, and to your other question, is that Peamount just had that season last year where everybody wrote them off. I wrote them off multiple times. Everyone else wrote them off. They're done. They're this, they're that. But every time Peamount sort of got that extra little bit of motivation. And like, yes, they've lost players this off season, but if Peamount have saved oil this year, how many more points did Peamount end up with this year? I'd probably say
8 or 10.
At least 8 or 10 more points. At least 8 or 10 more points. And if they were to end up with 10 more points, they're right on the back of Galway in fourth place. So probably even at 10 points, they're 5 points behind Galway. But that's the sort of a loss that they've had. Yes, we knew the likes of Tara was going, but I think for Peamount, they've just struggled to sort of get that extra quality in the door just because of prides and players away from other clubs. And I think it's been a poor season for Peamount, and I think they'll probably tell you that themselves.
Looking through the Shamrock Rovers team, and I just had a little flick through it. Obviously, Steph was finished, and we talked about her. We couldn't talk about her on the show last week, even though I think everybody knew who we were talking about. But there's a couple of older stateswomen in the team. Amanda Budden in goals is 30, Anya is 35, Steph obviously well into her 30s as well, and there's one or two others. Shauna Fox is maybe 20, 28, 27, I think. There's a few others of that ilk, but everybody else. I think Fiona Owens is the next oldest player that started the game last week, and she's 22. The likes of Emily Corbett would be seen as one of the older women in that dressing room. She's 20. So a lot of these girls, like I think Ella Kelly is 15, according to FAI Connect. Most of them are 18, 19, 20. So like this Rovers team, make no bones about it, if they can keep that team together for the next decade, or the bones of it, and improve it, you're going to see that group winning leagues in the future. There's no doubt about it, because the likes of, and we mentioned some of the names, the likes of Peamount, who won the league last year, Athlone, who won the league this year, they rely on some girls who are a little bit older than Athlone, maybe not so much.
Athlone team, because I was looking at the other day. The Athlone team was scary. I was looking at the other day. You know, it's your Shauna Brennan's, your Katie Shines.
And like Ocean Lloyd's only 21 or 22, yeah.
Like I think Laurie is 30 and Maddie Gibson is 27. I think Jessie Rossman then is the next oldest, and the rest is very, very young. The biggest problem Athlone are going to have over the next 2 years is keeping them sort of players. I think Rovers might have a bit of trouble with some of them youngsters as well, because there's no doubt the likes of Leo Leary, Aoife Kelly, Joy Roth, they're on a sort of an upward trajectory where we're seeing more and more opportunities come across the waters. And this is where, like, even from speaking to Kieran Kilduff at the media day for the Cup final, where he was sort of saying, we need to have something in place to sort of keep these players here, whether it's something that you're always harping on in the sense of if there's something to do with education, but the stuff there that they can, if football, and they can work and they can sort of be here, because the problem is the league can't afford the mass exodus to keep happening. And we've seen it with the men's league, how detrimental it has been and over the years. But the women's league, with the talent pool even less in terms of the numbers, it can't afford it. And like, yes, in the men's league, if 3 or 4 go away in a year, you're probably saying, okay, they can tolerate that. But with the women's league, the teams can't tolerate it, and that's an unfortunate thing.
But it's what we're losing them to as well. In the men's game, if you're looking at a guy going to the championship or even the upper end of League One, which is where most of our players tend to go, they're getting 2, 3, 4, 5,000 euros a week of a pay packet. The League of Ireland can't compete with that on a major level. They just don't have the resources. They don't have the back end. They don't have the sponsorships. They don't have the coverage or the attendances.
And they'd be stupid like they tried to.
Yeah, absolutely. All the clubs would be broke inside 12 months. But in the women's game, it's even less, because these girls might be getting that a quarter if they're lucky. Like, we hear some figures about maybe the likes of Katie McCabe at Arsenal playing in the Champions League with decent contracts at that level of the game in the WSL.
I'll read you something from that was an article that came out this off season about one of the championship clubs in England. The players had their wages set to 9,000 a year, and they've been put on 16-hour-a-week contracts. And that's a club where there's a current Irish international who's playing at that club right now. And I've had a confirmed thing by sources that it is actually fully accurate. But like a championship club, they've cut the hours down to 16 hours a week, and they're paying them $9,000 a year. They're literally paying them a minimum wage just to keep them under contract. And like the other side of it is, and I think this is where people have to realise with women's football is, a lot of these players, unless you're a WSL club, a top WSL club or a mid-table WSL club, you may have to find an alternative financial source while you're still playing football. Like some of the championship girls as well. Unless you've got accommodation, everything's paid for you, you're living off very little money, and it's difficult to do. And the problem is, it's the enticement that they're going to play in England, they're going to play in professional leagues. That's the enticement that's getting them to go. But that's where we need to close that gap. We need to sort of have something there. And I think what clubs are trying to do has definitely improved, but it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take time for it to sort of materialize at the minute. And I think this is where we sort of see the shift in the league as well, or in around the sense that the Dublin dominance of, we used to see all these top players just going to Dublin now. Well, now with the more options as well, I think that will help as well. But it's going to take a number of years before we see it being more difficult for these players to go.
Let's talk about the games last weekend before we get too bogged down in the bigger detail. Athlone had the league sewn up. We knew that was going to be a thing, but we did see some interesting results. Shells didn't beat Shamrock Rovers. I suppose Steph Zambra got an opportunity to kind of sign off her career in style with a goal as well. Would you be happy to have kind of put one over Shells on the last day of the season and kind of stop them getting the 3 points?
Do you know what's funny? When I was at this game, and when you sort of look at Steph's performance, she was actually very good for Shamrock Rovers. She probably could have had more. She had chances, and she sort of said to me after the game, she felt great. Even Collie was saying about her feeling great about being great after the game. Like, for her, for me, you got the whole sense of when the game kicked off, it was nearly written in the stars that she was going to find the net. And like, Amanda McQuillan could probably do better for the goal, but it's a typical type of Steph finish with the sort of inside of the foot, placing it into the corner. And like, you look at this game, I think Shells would have lacked a lot of intensity in it, because for Shells it's a difficult one. You don't want that player's injured. You don't want to have, like, there was nearly a moment where Shelbourne players were sort of screaming to the bench because Noelle Murray had been booked, and then she said something to the ref and sort of in fear that he was going to give her a straight red card. And you could see there was a little bit of an edge on the Shell side, that they didn't want injuries. They didn't want niggles. Rowan McLaughlin didn't play due to a niggle, and I think we've seen a little bit of that in Galway Athlone as well, in the sense that Ciara Kilduff, Laurie Ryan didn't want to risk her. Maddie Gibson, we knew she didn't niggle because Gemma Murphy said it on TG Carr when they won the league against Bows. Didn't want to sort of risk them players. But I think you got to give Galway a bit of credit in that game as well, for the fact that when they got the lead, and they were good value for the lead, and they were good value for the win. Young Hazel Donegan coming off the bench, scoring twice for Athlone. Superb young player. I think I read something about her the other day. I think the amount of goals, she scored quite a lot of goals this year for Athlone across the board. But like, we even seen in that, Kieran sort of giving youth a bit of a challenge. But the other side of it was the fact that he was trying to balance up that under-19s final the day after as well. And like, that weekend is the most important thing about that weekend, is sort of getting out there unscathed, where players aren't sort of in danger of missing the cup final. And I think we've seen a lot of that from both sides. Just as I was saying about Hazel Donegan. So the weekend, she scored her 100th and 101st goal in Athlone colours since through all age brackets. Like, that's phenomenal. That is absolutely phenomenal. Like, but I think realistically for both sides last weekend, it was cautious as they could be. But I think Galway full value for the win. I watched the game on TG Carr from Tallaght Stadium, and Shamrock Rovers, they were decent in patches. Probably just didn't do enough to win. I think a draw is probably a fair result in that game.
Yeah, I think both teams very little to play for, other than a bit of pride and a bit of bragging rights. The day very much about Steph. You were in the ground. I couldn't make it up myself, but a fitting tribute to one of the game's kind of greats over the last few years.
Do you know what? It's just testament to remembering what she's been like all the years, in terms of the way she's sometimes been mobbed. I was there waiting so long after the game trying to get her. Walked the entire length of the home dugout all the way down to the end, taking photos, signing autographs. Everybody wanted a piece of her. Everybody wanted to see her. Everyone wanted to say goodbye to her. I think they got a decent turnout for her as well. She put the performance in. In a way, it's sad to see her going, in the sense that, the performance she put in there was probably one of her best of the season. But I think the one thing I get from her is she's content with the decision. She's content with moving on, that she knows time is probably against her in terms of footballing. And I think she's somebody who I wouldn't be shocked in about 5 years' time if we see, could be even less, if we see managing or co-managing a team with. I wouldn't be shocked in 5 years' time we see her and Anya O'Gorman managing a team together in the League World.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be shocked.
I was going to say the exact same thing. The two girls have been kind of so integral to each other's careers, like, but at every stage with club moves, for the most part, they've kind of followed each other wherever they've gone, and I think they're good friends off the pitch as well. I think they'll be interesting to see what happens.
There's one thing I picked up from the weekend, and I asked Steph about this after the game, and I don't think a lot of people realise. I think there was a lot to it to retire in Tallaght Stadium for her as well, because she's had some big moments in Tallaght Stadium. You think back to the goal against the Germans from the Megan Campbell throw-in. She scored hat-trick for Ireland playing there.
Yeah.
Ireland's last competitive game against Montenegro. Herself and Anya O'Gorman both scored a hat-trick that night. Like, she has really good memories of playing on that pitch. She obviously won the FAI Cup with Peamount United there as well. So I think finishing in Tallaght was probably a nice way for her to go as well, and sort of one of them that she'll remember and she'll sort of remonstrate from. But a big personality leaving the league. The other side of it is, and no disrespect to some of the other players who are doing the punditry work, but it could be a case that first out the door could get the best of the gigs coming forward. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more of her on the likes of RTE. We see her a lot more on news outlets sort of talking women's football and talking football in general, because I think she's a very good commentator and co-commentator. I think she's very good at what she does. She's always very well prepared, and even with her analysis and stuff like that, I think there's a lot of opportunities going to open for her in football.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think she's very well spoken as well. So she's got a bright future ahead of her around the game, if not necessarily directly in the game. Let's talk for a second about some of the other games that took place last weekend. Of course, we mentioned Sligo at the top of the show. They've had a pretty kind of a late run of points that have kind of put a respectable twinge on their table. 3 points on the board 4 games ago. Now they've got 9. It does kind of put a different kind of gloss on their season, albeit for them coming after the departure of Tommy Hewitt from the dugout. Does it change anything in Sligo, or is it still a big job for whoever comes into that position on a full-time basis over the winter?
I think it's a massive job. No matter what, I think it's a massive job for who comes in there. Is it a nice way to finish? Yes, absolutely. But I think they need to realise what needs to be done. Like, you can say, and we've said it, and I said to you the importance of having no team finish winless. I think that would have been massive detrimental to the league. Like, you can say what you want about players maybe not turning up or not being at their best the last couple of weeks when Sligo have got results. I think the credit to them probably has to go in the fact that, like, even if you look at the Clarke game, they were pipped back and then they score again.
Yeah.
You know, even when in the Wexford game, when there's goals scored, they don't go and then lose that game. Whereas I think it's a good finish to the season, but there's no doubt it's been a really, really, really difficult season for them overall. And I think there'll be a lot of reflection within Sligo, and I think they'll realise that there's a lot of work to be done. And I think the appointments is probably going to be the first thing that'll be done, and then it's the case of how do you retain the sort of players that you want to retain, because I think you can't afford to lose the sort of players that Sligo have lost in the last year and expect to be competitive. And I think that's where they're going to have to try and do something. And can they tap into the Northern League again and get these couple of players, or is there any good young players playing with Finn Harp's underage that they can tap into and see can they bring down? Because I think they're going to need more resources, absolutely, on and off the field. But whoever takes that job, it is a big job, and hopefully they can build a little bit on this year.
And there's no standout local candidate really for the job either within the women's game. That's not to say there's not somebody within the men's game that might make that switch across, but it's going to be interesting to see what way the club go. They went with Steve Feeney for the first 2 seasons, who obviously had little to no contact with the women's game before being involved, and it kind of worked to a point. Like, it definitely had its pluses. I don't think it worked for either party. In hindsight, when you look back on it with 2020 vision on it, like, the results kind of tell a tale. They were tight, they were close in some games, did some very good performances for maybe 50, 60, 70 minutes in games, but they just couldn't close out results, and it just didn't work. Where they go next? Do they go down the same route of trying to recruit somebody from within the game who's not from the area? Someone, and again, I'm going to throw out a name that's been on our lips for the last probably 24 months in terms of his work at Limerick. God, the name escapes me right now. Apologies.
Albin House.
Albin Heise, yeah. Albin would be a great candidate. He definitely
I actually think a candidate like Albin will be detrimental to him.
Okay.
And not because of his footballing ability or his coaching ability, but because of the fact that you'd be getting somebody from the complete other side of the country.
Yeah.
I think they need to have somebody, if not local, from them within them community counties around it, because I think they need to sort of have people who could be on the ground a lot more and not necessarily just having to come for training and back. And I think that's something that's important. I mean, we see an awful lot more even with clubs now, and it worked this year with Treaty having a full-time manager, even if the players weren't full-time, to sort of be able to sort of do a lot of them things that could have been, that needed to be done. I think we'll see more and more clubs sort of doing it. Like, I know this is slightly changing sport a little bit, but like you even see it now with the GAA sort of coming out and saying it's only a matter of time before their inter-county managers go full-time and go on contracts because they see the demands. Whereas soccer, the demands in women's soccer have probably never been higher than what they are now. Like, you look at the amount of times clubs are training per week, the amount of work that's going into these clubs. Like, we spoke to Phil Trill earlier in the year, and he sort of said, like, he was very lucky with how his job were able to help and support him, that he could manage Galway. And I think that, like, it's really difficult for someone like Sligo Rovers to have someone who's traveling a couple of hours, maybe finishing work 3-4 o'clock in the day, and then having to get into a car, then travel back, because it's hard for them to be all in if they're doing that sort of commute. And that's the only concern I'd have with someone like an Albin Heise. Do I think Albin could be in the running for some of the jobs that are maybe coming up on the eastern side, the potential of the likes of a Wexford job, potentially? Like, he could be in that sort of conversation there because it's a little bit more local. But I think Sligo will be sort of a big commute. And I think for Sligo, the one thing I will say is I would hope they don't just rush the appointment. They actually take the time and look at what they need, why they need that sort of manager, and then sort of assess who is available. Like, there's no doubt. I know he said last week on the show sort of have boots and will travel, but like, if you could get someone like a Billy Cleary to go in there and sort of stem that sort of tide, or to give a bit of support there, I think someone like that who's been there when times maybe haven't been as easy at Galway, someone like that could work. But again, it's a big commitment for anybody who takes it. Yeah, no, absolutely. Big challenge ahead. And possibly whoever does come in, there's going to be that grace period as well where they're trying to get stuff right. We might not see a vastly improved Sligo side next season. It might be the year after before we see any kind of major results change for them. So it could be a tough time ahead. But that's where I think the importance of the right candidate is key, and actually having the right expectations and coming out and saying that at the start. You know, saying that we expect it to be a difficult season, saying we know there's got a lot of work to do. Start put it out, put your cards on the table, and just, because I think people appreciate, and I think a lot of it, like when you look at what Tommy's biggest problem was, he got a draw against Shelbourne on the opening day of the season. People expected a lot of things to come off the back of that. Yeah. Where it was never going to be easy to sort of back that up multiple results. And it sort of nearly created a bit of a, like, I know even, well, I'd said it's created nearly a false sense of security around there, because we're thinking, okay, Sligo have improved massively, and then all of a sudden, next couple of weeks they're being beaten, and it's difficult days for them then. And I think injuries as well didn't help them, or losing key players at key times during the season didn't help either. Absolutely. Another game to look at from last weekend. Galway United finished strong, a 3-2 victory over the champions Athlone. I suppose we had that little bit of a situation where Athlone knew the league was won, did rest a couple of players with the cup final in mind, but still, any day when it's Julianne Russell, Jenna Slattery, and I suppose Eve Dawson as well, scoring against you, you know you've been in a game. Good result for Galway just to finish off the season in fine style. But you know what's funny? I was sort of keeping an eye on that game for a different reason. And the reason I was keeping an eye on that game is obviously because of the fact of the race for the Golden Boot. Okay. You see Julianne scores, then Jenna scores, and you're sort of like, are we going to see a little bit? I think Jenna was just one that was on there. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to win this. It hasn't been the best the second half of the season but like when you look at Galway as an overall this year, like they've the most wins they've ever got in a league campaign with 13 league wins. They've never had 13 wins, even when we had a longer season. So for me, it's a really, really positive season. Retaining that All-Ireland Cup was massive for them as well, and there's so much to build on upon in Galway. Like, granted, they lost 5 games this season, but they finished third and finished 6 points off the top of the table. If you feel thrilled, you've got to be absolutely thrilled with that. You've got to be really, really happy with where your season has went, and if they can close that gap again next year, who's to say that we can't be talking about Galway again? The only thing I will say is I won't be coming on here and saying ever again saying that I think Galway will finish bottom of the league like I did last year.
Yeah, I might hold you to that. I might pull you up on that again. Final game of the weekend. The previous year's champions, Peamount United, at home to Treaty. Treaty have been the success story of the Treaty and Athlone to a certain point, but Treaty have probably been the non-title winning success story of the season in terms of where they've come, maybe from 24 months ago to where they are now, with those kind of step under Alban and then another step under Dominic, and I suppose Ciara McCormack coming in the middle of that as well didn't hurt matters in terms of what she brought to the table off the pitch. 7th place, they mightn't be delighted about it down in Marketsfield, but it's a solid season from where they've used to be at the bottom of the table.
So I'm just looking at tables here, right? 2021, they won 2 games. 2022, they won no games. 2023, they won 1 game. 2024, they finished 3 points behind 6th place Peamount United with 7 wins. As many wins, as I said earlier, as Peamount. 1 more win than Shamrock Rovers. Like, I think people need to be realistic as well with what's happened at Treaty United, and I think that you got to give credit where it's due to the work that they have done. Like, there's no doubt a lot of the players who've come in this year, we haven't seen as much of a turnover compared to, say, last year, where we would have seen a lot of them players sort of coming out and going and new players coming in. We've seen a lot more of a consistent sort of run for them. I think for me, young Katie Lawley sang her praises multiple times this season. I think at 16 has probably been one of Treaty's best players. Danielle Stairs been very good for them. Like I said to you last week, I thought they'd get something out of this game, and it was simply because if Peamount hadn't got a lot to play for. Did I think the Treaty would win the game? Probably not, but it's another great result for Treaty, and it's just a bit of credit for the hard work that they have put in this year. I think, and I don't want to put a bit of a downer on it, with so many foreign players in this year, what happens next year? How many of them are kept? How many of them move on? Could have a massive impact as to what actually happens with Treaty. I do have a feeling that Ciara McCormack is going to try and get more local players involved again this year and next year.
I think it's more attractive now. If you're a younger player, 16, 17, 18, coming through in the Limerick general area, whether it's Clare or Tipperary or anywhere around that neck of the woods, Treaty is now an option, because I think I just flicked through the league table since 2020, since Treaty came into the league, and like they'd won 6 games in 4 full seasons, and they've won 7 this year. So all of a sudden, the players, and I'll name a few of them as examples, but just
before you do that, just before you do that, just to add into a little bit more to that, if you look at the 2 seasons that Limerick were in the league beforehand, they'd only won a total of 6 games in the 2 seasons previous as well. So like a Limerick team has only won over, apart from this season, they'd only won 12 games over since 2017,
2018, I think.
2018.
It's been a challenge, but I think you can't neglect the fact that under Dave Rooney at the time, Limerick were half decent at that stage. Now, they weren't challenging for league titles, but they were much better than what Treaty were for the first 2 or 3 years of their existence. So I think credit is due there, but it's been a disappointing couple of years. But it's great to see them back. But I think, to go back to what I was saying, was that if you're a parent of a child who's playing ladies or women's football in Limerick now, coming up through the ranks, Treaty are now an option, where you would definitely say, well, I think she'll improve there. I think she'll get an opportunity there. I don't think she'll be beaten week in, week out, and I have to bring her to Galway or Cork or to Dublin or Athlone or Wexford. We've seen players go all over the place from Treaty in the last few seasons. So I think now a parent in the general vicinity of Limerick is going to say, no, we're going to Treaty. They're as good as anybody else in the league. Let's stay there. And I think that piece of work needed to be done to keep the youngsters coming through the academy in the club as well in the medium term.
But I also think on the other side of it as well, on that, there's a positive and a negative on this. I'll start off the negative. The negative for me around Treaty at the minute has just been the constant manager changes over the last couple of years. And I hope Sean Russell, with the fact they said he signed a multi-year deal, sees out a multi-year deal, because I think that's important as well for Treaty. That's the only negative I would say about Treaty at the minute is the managerial changes, the constant flip-flop in the way we've gone the last couple of years. The positive I would say in that is it's and I've mentioned one already in Katie Lawley, young Grace McInerney as well. We see these young players from the region who are good enough, with all the foreign players who've come in, are still getting opportunities and still showing that they can. So it's not even a case of saying, I go to Treaty, but they've loads of players coming in from abroad, I'm not going to get a chance. No, if you're good enough and you're working hard and that, and your development within Treaty, with these players that you have there, you will still get that opportunity. You will still get that chance to play senior football and to show what you can do. And I think a lot of it this year is breaking down barriers and breaking down the stigma that's been around sort of Treaty for the last couple of years, in the sense of they haven't been doing well. They haven't been doing. And I think this season will take an awful lot of that away. I still think they need to sort of do it on a consistent basis over another year or two. But I definitely think they've made massive strides this year. And I think not just the off the field staff who've put in a lot of work, financial time, all that effort and all that sort of stuff, but the players who've been there, who've actually gone and got the results on the field, I think deserve an awful lot of credit. Because we'd said it on this show, apart from losing they lost to Bows once. They've beaten Cork twice. They beat Cork twice. I think they either beat Sligo twice. They beat Sligo once and drew with Sligo once. Got a result against Bows. They've got results against a lot of teams this year. And like, even when a lot of times they were losing them games to the likes of Shelbourne, Peamounts, bar one or two of them games, every other one of them losses have sort of been by a goal. Like, the funny thing is, when I look at the league table for this year, like, after 20 games, and considering they lost 11 games, Treaty finished on a -4 goal difference, considering they lost 11 games. And that to me is a massive statement in itself, in the fact that they're not going out, and even if they are losing game, they're not going out and being beaten off the park. They're like,
but even the way they've ended, Aaron, as well, like the last two games of the season, they beat, I suppose, the defending champions from last year 1-0 on their own patch last week. And the week before, they beat Galway, who are the Avenir Sports Cup winners for the last two seasons. But the funny
thing about the Galway result is, at the time of the Galway result, Athlone hadn't played both.
Yeah.
So technically, Galway were still chasing that outside glimmer hope of a league title or finishing second place. So it's not as if they've gone, and this is where I think we need to give the credit. It's not as if they've gone in against the Galway side with absolutely nothing to play for. Galway knew they were finishing third and that was it. No, Galway still had that outside chance because of the fact that they were playing before Athlone, of putting that pressure on and keeping that pressure on Shelbourne as well. So I think that's where we need to give the credit to the Treaty as well, in that sort of sense, because to finish with results like that, like, it's two big wins, and them players will go off on a massive high. And listen, I'm delighted because I said it to you, I said it on this show, and I said it on social media. Like, we need strong regions of the likes of Limerick. We need strong regions of coming up of the northeast in the country. We need a lot of stronger regions coming through in this league. And what Treaty have done this year, that definitely helps an awful lot when you're trying to attract things like sponsors and stuff like that to come and invest in the women's game.
Let's talk about the showpiece that's happening in
before we do.
Time? Go on.
Before we do, one thing I just want to flag on this year's league campaign. As far as I know, it's the last league campaign so for the first 10 or so years until the league changes in terms of going professional, the league was decided by a playoff if we were level.
Okay.
These last 2 years have been decided on head-to-head. Next year, as far as I know, we're going to goal difference. So that in itself shows how far the league has come, that we're actually getting rid of the need to sort of say, we can't trust that one team is just going to go absolutely pulverize some other team, and we can actually say that the games are all going to be competitive. And I think that's a massive step in the right direction for the league.
Very, very positive news. We didn't actually decide the league on head-to-head this year, even though we could have, because Shells didn't win the last game of the season, so
Well,
it didn't actually matter.
technically, that's why they won the league with 2 games to go. Was because of the
Yeah.
head-to-head instead of having to. Because I had people complaining over that, but it was the same thing happened last year when Peamount beat Wexford.
Yeah.
That the head-to-head came into it, and that's why they'd won the league that day. Because I wasn't even aware until the day of the game last year that Peamount could win the league in Wexford.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. Cup final, third instalment of what has been a fairly exciting trilogy so far. Athlone versus Shells, top 2 teams in the league this year. I think, I could be wrong in saying this, but I'm pretty certain they were the top 2 teams in the league last year. No, they weren't. Sorry, what am I saying? Peamount won the league. But they've been thereabouts in that hunt.
The year for 2020,
yeah.
2022, they were the top 2.
Yeah, it's so they've been in the hunt for the last 2 years, 3 years. Are we looking at a classic, or are we looking at a game that Owen Wearen's going to put out to not lose and try and make sure his side finish with a trophy at the end of the season?
I don't think Owen Wearen knows how to go out and not lose games, and that's not being disrespectful to Owen. I think the way they've gone about it is they've tried every game they've played this year. Like, the easy option for Shells would have been when they played Athlone in the league to go out on that stage and be like, let's not just lose this game. Let's not just lose this game. But I don't think they have that in them, in the sense of to go out and not just lose. I think they'll go out and they'll go for it. I think it'll definitely be a bit of a fiery affair. Like, I think a lot of people will look back to the game in Tallaght Park earlier in the year where the temper sort of flared over a little bit. But there was a lot of, obviously, circumstances that day with the Chloe Singleton injury, and I think from a Shells viewpoint, there's no doubt that they're going to be hurting about what happened with this league, because you look at some of the draws they've had in this competition. Like, the prime example to me is the draw against Bows, the couple of early draws in the early part of the season. Like, there's been a massive lesson or a massive learning curve from Shells this year under new management. And I think when you look at Athlone sort of, apart from, and Kieran was very keen to sort of stress this in the pre-cup final media about them losing the opening day of the season, and sort of how they had to go on a run off the back of that. But like, if you take that away, when Kieran Kilduff came in last year, from when he came in mid-season, took over from Tommy Hewitt, they were probably on champions winning form for the second half of the season, where they were just ran out of time. Whereas they've sort of hit the ground running this year. Both teams have obviously lost players, but I think at the end of the day, I think we've got the best 2 teams in the country this year playing off against each other, and I can't see anything other than a titanic game of football. I'm not going to say it's going to be the prettiest game of football at times. It's definitely going to be a battle. But if both teams sort of like that spark, we could see plenty of goals. And I know from even listening to Pearl Slattery the other day when she was asked about Brenda Tabay, because Tabay sort of come and shine the lights the last second half of the season. But Kate Mooney's doing the exact same thing on the other end of the field. Like, the goal she scored against Shamrock Rovers last week, where she rounded Amanda Budden and scored into an empty net. Like, if either of them two get chances, or Maddie Gibson gets a chance, like, this game could easily be 2-3-4 all. Like, even that, like, look back to last year around the fact that Gemma Quinn scored the goal in extra time to give Shells the lead, and then Gillian Keenan got the equaliser. But like, I think it is going to be a titanic battle. I think Athlone, they've weathered the storm in the sense when they lost Casey Howe, and then they lost Chloe, and then losing Kerry Ann Brown to the ACL. Where Shells have sort of strengthened with the addition of Kate Mooney second half of the season. And I think both sides take away the couple of, like, last week. Last week to me is irrelevant. I wouldn't read anything into last week. I think going into this game, both sides are really going to fancy it. Shells have been there, done it, got the T-shirt many a times. Athlone would have the confidence from last year, and I think it's the sort of game where it could be decided on a potential mistake or an indecision from somebody, because there's not going to be a lot between the two sides. Yeah. I'll go as far as saying I wouldn't be shocked if we get penalties again.
Yeah, that's my next question to you, because Athlone have not really set the world alight in an attacking sense in this competition in the last 2 years. I think 3 of the 4 games last year were decided by penalties. The semi-final fairly facile win in the end against Sligo. I think it was 4-0 up in the showgrounds. This year, 1-0 victory or 2-1 victory over Treaty and a 1-0 victory over Sligo means that they've really just come in at the bare minimum of qualifying for this. They got to buy in the first round. So when you compare their run to the cup final with Shells, not that it matters because the league is everything as well, but Shells have kind of had a tougher route. They've put out Galway, they've put out Shamrock Rovers, fairly straightforward in the semi-final against Cork, all right, but they've had a harder route to the final. Should that make a difference? It probably won't make much of a difference on Sunday.
No, I think the fact that they've both played top teams in recent weeks, and I think when you reflect back to that Shamrock Rovers 3-3 draw at Athlone, I think that was a big moment as well in their season, and the fact that they got that bit of resilience and the Maddie Gibson goal, and even Maddie Gibson not playing last weekend, they've confirmed that the knock she had, she's fully fine. I don't think either side. I think either side will go into this full strength, apart from the players who are obviously on season-ending injuries. I can't see many more missing out. I think it's gonna come down. It'll all come down to on the day. One thing that I am seeing, I haven't seen very much from Shells, and I haven't really checked in very much in the sense of it, but Athlone tweeted today that they've had to open extra blocks for seating because Athlone have had big requests for numbers, which is great, and you'd imagine Shells will have a decent crowd as well. Thankfully, this one, not like 2 years ago where the men were playing that evening, which didn't really help the year they won the cup. So thankfully, there's no League of Ireland games on Sunday this week.
Yeah, no, it should be interesting times ahead, and like a great game. Who's going to be the game winner? Do you think? Are we looking at maybe Noel Murray on one side, Maddie Gibson on the other? Are there other names? Ronan McLaughlin could be an outside bet if she's fully fit to play. Roisin Malloy might be in that discussion as well. Where do you think the winner's going? Or are we just looking at Brenda up front for Athlone being the game winner?
I don't think Brenda Tabby is going to be the game winner. I will go as far as saying to you, I think Maddie Gibson is going to score.
Okay.
I think Kate Mooney is going to score. I think we're going to get some late drama. I think we're definitely going to go to extra time. I'm not 100% convinced that we're going to go to penalties yet, but I think we're definitely going to go to extra time.
Well, that is fighting talk. If you've got money, head down to Paddy Power and stick it on there. Aaron reckons it's an extra time game and a draw at 90 minutes with Maddie Gibson and Kate Mooney on the score sheet. Interesting.
The only thing I will say, and I said this earlier, is I hope it's not decided by a mistake, because I think both of these teams have worked too hard this year to have a moment where a player makes an individual error and that decides the game. I hope it's a moment of brilliance that separates the two sides. Yeah, no, I concur with that. Hopefully there's enough talent there to make it a positive result rather than a negative one, if that makes sense. Are you going to the game? I can't make it myself. I'm otherwise engaged at the weekend, but you going to the game? Absolutely. Cannot wait. Took the day off work yesterday even to go to Tallaght for the media day. I've sort of gone on took a bit of a backward seat in terms of taking days off work to go and cover media events anymore. But the cup final buzz has got for me. I think I'm even buying into the narrative of it's 1-1. You know, I'm even buying into and I still reflect back to a couple of years ago under Tommy Hewitt when Athlone had the goal that was disallowed for offside. If they had got that goal, potentially could have changed that outcome of that game. And I can't wait. The only thing I'm really hoping for this weekend is it's slightly earlier in the year in the sense of the cup final to last year. Is that if we can break that attendance record that was set last year, to me that'd be a big thing for me. And I'd love to see a massive crowd in Tallaght Stadium for this cup final. Yeah, no, it would be fantastic. The girls deserve it. The game deserves it in the country as well. So here's hoping. I might see if I can change my plans and get up to Tallaght on Sunday, but it's a bit of a long stretch. But we'll do it. We'll do my best. Other than that, I suppose it's nearly the end of the season. It's the last game of the season. Neck on the line. You said it's going to be tight. You said it might go to penalties. Who's going to be lifting the cup on Sunday? It's always me answering these questions.
Yeah, I know, because I set it up that I don't get myself in trouble. That's why. You know what? I'm going to let you put your neck on the line for once. I think my heart says Athlone, but the head says Shells, if I'm being honest. I just think Athlone, the edges have been taken off by the fact they've won one each in the last 2 seasons. And I think Shells just have that little bit of extra, I don't even know how to say it, but just a little bit of extra maybe guile. The dark arts maybe a little bit more experienced at it. And I think it could be 2-1 to Shells. And I think we'll see a fantastic goal from both teams and maybe a scrappy one just to win it at the end. But
the only thing I'd say is the referee's definitely in for their money and to earn their money on Sunday.
Yeah, there's 2 teams that like to get physical, so I think it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. But there's a whole load of little subplots which I love that we have in the game now. Like you talk about Katie Keane left Shells because she couldn't break into the team, and now she could be the reason they don't win the cup on Sunday. That there's that dynamic to it. There's plenty of other kind of I know there are players who've played for both teams in the past as well. So interesting times ahead to see how that pans out. But that for me is an interesting one as well, just see how Katie gets on, because I think she has been an integral part to what Athlone.
I'll ask this question. Could she be an outside bet to be in our Ireland squad tomorrow?
Yeah, she should be. It shouldn't even be an outside bet. Like I firmly believe, and I know there's conversation all over the place about this at the moment, but I firmly believe that the Irish League is good enough to have 5 or 6 girls in that squad every single time. And you could probably pick, like, Roisin Malloy is worth a shout. Rowan McLaughlin is worth a shout. And there's plenty of others. Like, these girls don't, no more than the men on the men's side of the house, they don't just miraculously get a million times better because they get a flight to England. Like, these players are very, very good.
Ellen Malloy is going to be very interesting.
She should be in the squad as well.
Because the fact that wasn't getting a look in, then she's gone to Sheffield United, scored a goal last weekend against Birmingham. If she's back into the squad, that sort of says, that magic flight. It seemed to work a little bit with Vera as well. It's frustrating in that sense. And one thing that Kieran Kilduff sort of said when speaking to us yesterday is, like he said, everybody's talking about Julianne Russell being in the media. Yes, she's 50 caps from previous before she got back into the squad this time. But he said we should be championing the likes of Julianne to help and continue to get that push, because Julianne is breaking down barriers that will allow other people to be noticed, other people to be seen, other people to be recognised. And he was talking about, the importance of utilising that and utilising the exposure that Julianne has got from the national team to bring it back in to help with the exposure of the league as well as a whole. And I think he's right in that sense, because every time a home-based player is in, we should be really championing and pushing it across all the clubs, and not just.
But there's probably 10 players immediately spring to mind. Jess Fitzgerald from Peamount should be in the discussion about looking at players coming through. Eva Mangan down at Cork, Emma Doherty, if she's fit, should be involved in that discussion as well. Like, they're not the finished article. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they will walk straight into the team. But these players need to see what's ahead of them, get that step up. Maybe it's a home-based training camp. Maybe it's a B squad that goes to play a game against Northern Ireland, home and away twice a year.
Do you know what I used to love? And I'm going to go before Vera Powell. Colin Bell. Used to love chatting to Colin Bell about players, because if you chat to Colin Bell about a player, you could be on the team who's bottom of the league and not performing well as a team. He'd still know every player, the player's weakness, their strengths, their weakness, what they've done well. And he'd be able to just go list off, needs to do this, needs to do that, needs to do this, needs to do that. And I used to be always fascinated, because there's not many times where he was at a game. Like, there was one day I was in Peamount with him. He was at a game and he was there for about an hour early, and went upstairs. We were just having a cup of tea and chatting to him, chatting football, chatting other things outside of football. But, like, he knew absolutely everybody, and he knew what their strengths and what their weaknesses are. And that was someone who, you knew he was watching. He's watching. He has a keen intent on it. But you're right. There's so many players that you could name. I'd love to see even a B team play in the North or something. Because the problem is how do you encourage these girls to sort of stay to want? And, like, we're seeing a bigger thing now, whereas the Gaelic football, like, you've seen it with your own local county this year with Leitrim, with Murren mix them both.
Yeah,
the options are there if them players are good enough. You spoke last week about Derval Byrne could do a job for Leitrim. Them sort of players, if they don't feel that opportunity is potentially there to progress in terms of international football, they could look at that alternative pathway. We've seen even Lauren Holman a couple of years ago with Cork who went to play Camogie. Lisa Castley went to play Camogie. We've seen many of these sort of players, and I think that's where we need to sort of have that conversation, so they know they're being looked at, they know they're being engaged with. Like, even if it's a case of, okay, this is what you need to work on. They're having there's conversations around things. Because I think it's important just even to have the conversations. If we can't afford to do something as an association to sort of have these other sort of games or these home-based sessions, that's fine. But sort of, I think the other side of it is the FAI sort of, they talked about wanting the 23s and sort of things like that, but everybody knows that financially they're not in a great position at the minute. And I think
I think it's a huge argument there for a combined Celtic League with the 4 home provinces. So you take the girls in the Welsh League, the girls in the Scottish League, the girls in the Northern Ireland League and the Republic of Ireland League, and take a selection out of them that have not been capped in the last 12 months. So you take girls who aren't playing underage no underage internationals eligible, no senior squad members eligible, and you bring away a team for a week and you play all the other nations at some stage in the season. It could be in the middle of one team season, because we're the only ones that, the North have a summer season as well, but it could be in the middle of the, say, pre-season or at the end of a season for the other girls in a non-competition year. And it becomes a week where you go to Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland or Ireland every 4 years, and these girls aspire to be in that. And there's a cost to it, but I think in terms of giving girls a realistic target and a platform to step onto, that they can show what they can do at a higher level, and then maybe make that step into international squad. These girls, and we've named a dozen, I could probably name another dozen. I don't know how I didn't mention Jenna Slattery when I was going through the list.
Yeah, but
there's plenty of them. Aoife Kelly at Shamrock Rovers, Joy Ralph, Leo Leary. These girls, they're well able to play at a higher level than where they are.
We've seen the success of this with the women's rugby, with the 2 provincial sides that have gone and played.
Yeah.
And we've seen the success that we're starting to get, because women's rugby was in a really, really bad place a couple of years ago in terms of investment and stuff. Like, we've seen that sort of potential. And the thing is, the League World is going to continue to grow. There's going to be more and more teams coming in. Like, there's going to be a lot of expansion in that, and it's about how do we make sure that we don't lose a generation or 2 of players as well while we are expanding that league.
Yeah, 100%. The final thing before I let you go on that is these girls deserve the opportunity, and that's it. It boils down to, we don't know what these girls can do until we actually give them an opportunity to show what they can do. So we'll see what comes through in the squad. I'm not that hopeful. I think we'll see a lot of the girls who've just left the league included. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll see too many of them. Jess Hennessy could be another one who gets a shout after she's moved on to Forest.
I can't see Hennessy being involved. I think if Jess Hennessy had gone to a championship club, I think she potentially would be.
It's that flight though. That flight makes the world of difference. We'll see tomorrow. All should be revealed. Aaron, enjoy the game on Sunday. I might see you at it, but if I don't, we will have a catch up next week and wrap up the season and take a look back at who we felt has impressed us over the last 8 months or so since the season kicked off. As always, pleasure having you. And we'll chat to you next week.